Hi, I'm Sandi Genovese, and today we are going to be making silhouettes. If you look at the frame, you can see that instead of putting it into a scrapbook, I've put it into a frame. And that's because I create these once a year for my niece's little girls, so that we have them every year and you can see how they change from year to year. You're going to do the same kind of thing as you would do for in a scrapbook. And if you haven't made them before, you are going to be amazed at how easy it is to create a silhouette from a photo. If you look at my finished one, you can see that I've just created background paper by rubber stamping with a watermark ink pad. I've cut out the silhouettes and we're going to see how to do that. And then I've just added their names and some stickers and die cuts, all the things that you would have in a scrapbook page, but just into a frame because they have a section on the wall where they add this to what they've already got started from the previous years. Now to begin with, I have Allison send me their photos, and here are the photos that she sent. You can see they're not even the same size. It doesn't matter because they're going to get reduced down anyway. So when I reduce it down, I'll just end up reducing this one a little more in order to make her silhouette seem like it matches in size to Quincy's. So I start with the photos and I just take tracing paper, and here is, if you'll lay this down, you can see just with a regular black ink pen, all I did was lay the tracing paper down and then just trace Addison's silhouette. You can see that I simplified and created things like, instead of every single line of her hair, just chunks. And in this case, these aren't going to show anyway. But I go around and then I simplify. Her hair was cut off a little here, so I went ahead, simplified, but I went all the way down to the end. I did the same kind of thing here with Quincy. You can see when you look at the photo, see how her eyelashes are sticking out. You know, individual eyelashes look different, but I'm just going to sort of create a triangle version of that so that when you trace around and you simplify, instead of every little piece of hair, it's simplified, but it's not difficult. And you'll end up with these tracing paper versions of silhouettes. And if you want them to face each other, you can keep them this way, and then after you cut it out of black paper, you can reverse one so that it faces the other direction, which is what I did in my example. Once you have these, you put them into the photocopier and you reduce them down to the size that you want for if you're putting them into a picture frame or a scrapbook page. Mine ended up being reduced down in size to this. Let me move all this out of the way. Here are the size that mine ended up being. And you can see, as I said, I just turned over the one for Quincy, so it would be the same. Now, I've gone ahead and I've cut out Quincy, and I want to show you, I've marked in red. Instead of having all this detail down here, I really mostly just want their lovely, sweet faces. So instead of having their shoulder and their arm and all that, you can see that here is, I cut out, I didn't put the teeth in either, so I've cut that, just cut it out as a smile. But notice here with a red line, you can see that's how I simplified. So I just have a little more of her hair and her neck in order to create this silhouette. And then in order for this to be the right size, I sort of use this as a guide to make sure that the one that I do of Addison is roughly the same size in bulk, which you can see in this case it's going to be when hers is reduced at this %. And you just have to play in the copier with different sizes until you feel like they feel like they match nicely. I want to go ahead and make this one so you can see how really truly easy this is. What I did with Addison is I simplified. I drew in red, instead of having, the V-neck of her clothing and all that, I'm just going to have the silhouette of come right back up here to where it can attach to her neck, and then I'll go right on with the silhouette. What I do is I'm going to just take a stapler and I'm going to staple all the way around the outside edges so that I end up cutting off the staples, and that way I don't have to worry. You could also do this with adhesive, but staples are a little bit easier for you to see. Basically, you want to attach it to the paper, but you don't want to attach it behind the part you're going to use. So when you have it glued or stapled or whatever around the edges, leaving the good part, the silhouette part, untouched, then you're just going to go back and with the scissors, I'm going to cut out. So I'm going to come in here and start cutting. Remember I said I was using that red line as my simplification guide. So I'm going to just cut and I'm cutting through my pattern, which is just copy paper. And the silhouette, the black paper, is like a black linen paper. It's acid free and it's thin, so it's easy to cut through both thicknesses. There's no need for you to make it more difficult by having to cut through something heavy. It doesn't need to be heavy because it's going to be protected and fastened onto either a scrapbook page or onto, in this case, a background paper that's going to go into a frame. So I'm going to come around, cut around her lip. I'm coming up to where her nose is. At some point, it's not uncommon for me to cut off some of this excess that kind of gets in my way as I'm trying to cut around the edges here. So, and then I've come up. Sometimes if the second set of eyelashes, if the silhouette is such a side view that you don't see the second eyelashes, I add them in anyway because it looks good to get just a hint of that second eye. So I'm going to cut those eyelashes there. I think in these examples, both, I think they were angled so you could see both. When I get here, I'm going to ignore all those in-between details, and I'm just going to come back. I'm going to cut here, and I'll go back now and trim out this little piece here. So that will fall away. And then cut around her hair. I don't need to even worry about the ear. I put all that detail in because sometimes I like to go back and do another one where I use all patterned papers, and I actually cut out the clothing. I'll turn that into another episode, and I'll show you how to do that as well. But for this example, all I'm doing now is just cutting around the hair, getting close to the end here. And now I'm going to follow the red simplified line, what looks kind of like the bust area for the neck. And look, I pull this off, and that easily you have this wonderful silhouette. It is incredibly simple and so effective. Now, once you have both silhouettes, it's time to look at decorating the rest. So remember I mentioned that what I did was I used an ink pad that was a watermark ink pad, and I just rubber stamped to create, I wanted a background paper that was really subtle, and all the background papers that I had that were patterned were too busy. And I didn't like how much pattern they created. But when I used plain paper, it just seemed like too simple. So I decided that the watermark ink pad was kind of the best choice of the two. So I just took rubber stamps, and I'm not going to keep going, but you can see how you create a nice pattern. And if I'll bring this over so you can see this one. You can see when you look at it closely, you can see all the detail in that background stamp, that watermark pattern that creates that background paper. Now, to look at the base at the bottom, what I did was I took some yellow paper and a white pen, and you can see I've already got some white stripes, but I'm going to add just a couple more. And it doesn't have to be straight. It doesn't have to be fancy. What I'm doing is I'm just creating yellow paper that has sort of a plaid, almost a grid pattern to it. And the white is so close to the yellow that I like the subtlety of the design. I'm going back now to draw some of the lines going the other direction. And I like some to be spaced really tight and some to be spaced far apart, just so you have some variety and it looks kind of nice. I can see that my white pen is almost out of ink. So normally you'd get a little deeper impression than that, but you can see how it's starting to work. Once you have the pattern complete, then I went back and I added a striped paper, and I added it to both the bottom and the top. I'm going to just go ahead and put it at the top, but you would put it on my finished one. I had it at both the bottom and the top. And then I took a black pen and I wrote their names. So I have Quincy, and of course you're going to have the background paper. This one I didn't complete the design, but you would have all of that all done out. And then Addison, Ddison. So With a black pen, I just hand wrote their names. This is going to attach to the base. And then I had stickers, and I actually used some die cuts as well. But in order to finish off all the corners, because this looks so unfinished on these edges, I went back. This isn't stuck down. I'll just put a little bit of adhesive to give you the idea. But of course, you're going to want to center it so that it's centered on the page and the frame doesn't cut anything off. And then to soften these funny edges, I went back and added die cuts and stickers. If I bring back the finished one, you'll see what I mean. You can see how on this edge here, I have die cuts and stickers, and over here more stickers. And of course, as I mentioned, just hand wrote her name, added these stripes, and then the big to do, of course, are the silhouettes themselves. So since this one is Quincy, this one's going to go here, and this one's Addison, and it's going to go here. And because it's black paper, of course, it's easy to turn them over. You just fasten them, just with adhesive, you just fasten them down. Of course, you have to imagine the rest of the background paper done. And the final thing was a frame. And let me bring up and show you. This is the frame that I got. I got it at Hobby Lobby. And all the times I've shopped at Hobby Lobby, I have never seen it where the frames are not 50% off. It just seems to be a permanent thing. So this frame, which says that it was $16.99, was really only, instead of being $17, it was only $8.50, which was a good deal. And instead of using it to highlight one photo, if I set this down, you can see that this is going to fit inside. And so it's going to fit, there's a little overlap when you look at the back of the frame. It has a little thing that allows you to take this out. And when you take it out, you can use this as your guide to cut the paper so that this matches the size of the yellow paper that I have here. And then the whole thing is going to just slide right into that frame. Take the mat out as well, because I don't need that either. And you end up with this really cool silhouette. It's such a fun thing. If you haven't tried making silhouettes from your photos, you're in for a good surprise. They're easy and they look great.